But once you get really familiar, like after you know all the points performance and the details and the nuances, I think what you're describing is an intellectual humility, is to go back to something again and say, what do I not know about this? Anyway. No shit, there I was.
I can't say it because both my mom and Polly watch this. I might swear later.
What were the alternative cuss words that you would say in high school?
So here's a fun fact.
Kind of like Deion Sanders, where he's like, darn, what does he say? Like darn? I think so. Says darn a lot.
You know, since we were talking about Polly, what she says is shoot a moose.
Shoot a moose?
Instead of, yeah, that's what she says. Shoot a moose. It's
Wait,
hilarious.
instead of what?
Instead of shit, probably.
We got him to say.
Yeah,
nice, fell right into that one, dude.
I'm an adult.
Fell right into that
Look,
one.
all these words are made up.
Shoot a moose.
If people want to be offended by them, that's their own perception of the word.
See, I think
now we're into it.
I think a lot of it is just how you say it. You know? Like if I say, man, this is a good fucking cup of coffee. It's not really that offensive.
That's all right.
But if I say, God bless, this is not a cuss word, but it feels like I said something like I shouldn't have said.
Feels like, don't tell God to bless.
Holy Moses. That's a good one too.
Yeah.
So what did you say in high school?
You know, there was a weekend, I think in second grade, where I went to Santa Barbara with my cousin Nick, and I did every bad thing I could think of. All I did was swear. I don't think I said other words.
Wait, how old are you?
I was in second grade. He lived near a golf course.
You tried them all out.
We would steal golf balls after people hit them if they went into the woods, and we would sell them back to, like, we made money off of golf balls. We chewed sweetgrass, and we swore all weekend.
Whoa.
And then I went home, and
that's a lot.
And never again.
Yeah.
I never did anything like that
again. You got
again.
out of your system.
The next time I swore, I was
22.
I was 22. Yeah.
Really?
I just didn't say bad words. All through college football. My senior year, I started swearing on the field, and then it was really hard to stop. Once I did, I was like, oh, that feels really good when someone hits you and you just let one out. A swear word.
Yeah. Now, can you remember back to, were there times where you would lecture people about their use of profanities? Like, hey, guys, we got to stop. If we're going to really represent the
Grace Brother
Lancers Christian Academy, we got to clean up our language.
I can't be hearing this out here on this field. I was a punk like that. A punk in the sense that you
would sit people down and be like, hey, I need to lecture you.
At the end of my senior year, we had our awards banquet for football.
You're a leader.
We won, CIF championship.
Smart run.
We were all the man. Mm-hmm. And we went out to Ventura, and we were out on the boardwalk watching the waves late at nights.
With just a bunch of dudes watching waves?
Just a bunch of dudes watching waves. Yeah, the girls were probably coming.
Yeah.
Can we relax over here? Heavens.
The last one we shot, Jerry made a good point. It's like, if they laugh, you know that it's going to be something that is funny. They're encouraging.
Yeah. So, anyway, my buddies were all smoking Black & Milds or Swisher Sweets or cigars. And I walked over, and they're my best friends. And I go, you're not 18. You're not 18. Put that out. I'm serious. That's how I was. That's the way I was. I was also the guy on the bus who was like, either listen to music and shut up or shut up.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear, you need to be focused on the game.
You better have DC Talk on your CD player, or I'm throwing that out the window.
Is that Tenacious D? Is that the edited version?
Better be the edited version, or I don't even know who you are anymore.
They don't sing in the edited version. It's just purely instrumental. Did he say kielbasa sausage? Edit that out.
Oh, man.
All right, coffee's kicking in.
Yeah. Why do you have a whistle around your neck?
I was wearing it coaching on Tuesday.
And you just never took it off. It's Friday.
I didn't take it off. And then I got in my car and thought, well, no one else uses that whistle. I'll just put it in my cup holder. And then I saw it this morning and thought, well, we're going to talk about coaching, so might as well
feels right.
Put on my coaching outfit. And I ran into someone at LDU that's like, do you always wear this? Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
I'm a coach full time.
I had a whistle on for soccer practice yesterday, and I got to say, it felt good. It feels good. I hit that shortstop position, hands on the knees, whistle in the mouth, head scanning back and forth, just ready to boop, boop,
right here.
Freeze.
Did you cover your eyeballs?
Of course.
With dark glasses?
You don't want them to know where you're looking.
Nope.
Right? I mean, I could have just been taking a nap.
They can't see your eyes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
They don't know.
You could be looking at them the whole time.
Now these are 5-year-olds.
Yeah, but the Valkyrie,
they got to learn.
They know.
They got to learn.
They're on a mission. None of them are smoking cigarettes.
Not yet.
Yeah.
That'd actually be kind of funny to see a bunch of 5-year-olds roll up to the game with.
Yeah. Anyway, that's why I'm wearing the whistle, is because it was in my car. I needed to bring it back into my place of business, and here we are.
Mm-hmm. Now, typically on these podcasts, which is all about the art of radical health and athlete design, it's premeditated. I have a pad, and I'm trying to act like it's off the cuff, but I've rehearsed it. I've looked in the mirror, be like, no, don't say that word. It's stupid. I try to get, but right now, we're freestyling. And you know why? Well, one, because we can, but two, it's really just a throwback to Pontific Coffee. It's really just how all this started.
Cheers.
For our fan base, which is significant, they may not know that's how this all got started.
Yeah.
Just working out, drinking coffee, talking about things.
Yeah.
So what do you want to talk about today?
Well, we want to provide something of value.
Fingers crossed.
I could go down one of two roads. We could talk about coaching burnout, not coaching athletes that are burnt out, but coaching coaches that are burnt out on coaching. Or I thought it might be a fun idea to talk about some of the coaches we've had in the past. From what I've heard, most of what we've discussed on this podcast has been about coaching for health. And it might be nice to contrast coaching for sport against coaching for health, because I think there's some things that sport coaches can do that we could pull from. They could be useful in the health industry.
Well, let's set out on a journey. What do you say?
I say let's go.
Now the burnout.
Hoist the sail.
The burnout thing came actually from someone on Instagram that said, "Hey, you've talked about burnout, stress specifically for the individual, but what about for the person that's facilitating this, the coach, somebody that's been doing this for a long time? How do you remain enthusiastic?" And yeah, I mean, I don't think we have to spend forever on it, but it's something that's been at the front of my mind because there's gyms closing. I saw some email from CrossFit Mayhem. It was like, CrossFit's dead.
Yeah, they said that.
Did you see that?
Yeah.
It was really aggressive, and I read it because it was a clickbait, but there was nothing to substantiate like why or what they thought about that.
Right.
But the one data point that they said is that the affiliate numbers are at an all-time low compared to what it's been in recent years. And I think that probably does have a lot to do with that topic of people getting into something and thinking it's going to be a certain thing and then figuring out at some point that it's not that thing. I find you as somebody that does a really good job of being enthusiastic. I don't think that's just because you're, flippantly being silly, but it's because underneath the shades and that.
Don't tell him. Don't tell him.
there's some thought there. There's some thought. So, what are your thoughts on the subject?
What comes to mind when people might say CrossFit is dead, or that it's kind of, well, in that sense, kind of burning out, maybe on the athlete side, and the coaching can play a part in that, I'm sure, because if the coach loses enthusiasm, the athletes might. But it's been what, 2 decades almost since CrossFit's been around. It's not a lot of time, but at this point, you're having who was the original elite, now in their 40s, and as well as anyone that the theme of that life cycle is we do CrossFit as hard as we can. We learned about nutrition. We changed everything we could. Everything's intense all the time. And then they're like, I don't want to do that anymore. I'm going to go use my fitness for something else. And that's mixed martial arts, jiu-jitsu, adventure racing, anything. But eventually that road of constant intensity ends. So, and now I'm 37 and I'm starting to feel like, well, I've been competing my whole life, whether it's in football or exercise. And I think that if the athletes are burning out, it might be because we aren't supposed to compete every day. And I apologize to the brand.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man.
But, the sentiment's still there. But what I mean is, if you
tough
come
tagline, yeah.
If you come in every single day, like I've played at the professional football level, which wasn't that different from the collegiate as far as the intensity of the game and the week. But there's a reason there's an off season, and there's a reason there's only one game a week. And we're talking about a very intense game where baseball you could play every week. There's intense moments, but when you're putting your body on the line and literally saying, I'm going to go as hard as I possibly can, there is typically a 3-hour warm up. There is a 1-hour cool down, and then there is rest and constant attention from an athletic training staff. And that's throughout the whole week and the whole season.
That's a great point.
So if you jump into, hey, I've got a 30-minute warm-up, which is a long warm-up for a CrossFit class, and you've got a 5 to 25-minute workout at what CrossFit says high intensity, heavy loads, fast movements, explosive, change of direction, whatever. And then you have a 5-minute cool down or not, and then go back and repeat it the next day. Yeah, that story spells burnout. Absolutely. But if you approach it, here's the comparison to an actual football week where you compete once a week. A Monday is your most intense practice where there's some contact and there's full speed. Tuesday, similar, maybe take some of the contact out, get more into the intellectual side of the game planning. Wednesday, even more intensities dialed back. There's more recovery. Your body's starting to feel a little more prepared for the Saturday. Thursday, take off the pads. You're just wearing helmets and you're getting good mental reps while you're keeping your body fresh. Again, active recovery. Day before the game, did I get there? Well, day before the game, same deal, mental reps, and then you're ready to perform. Now, if you took that same approach into a CrossFit gym, I think you would see that story play out longer. And people can still do that. The thing is, in a CrossFit gym, not everybody's showing up at the same time every day to do the thing because it's not a team sport. And so as a coach or a programmer, you program a hard workout to do every single day. Some people show up. Some people that show up once a week or maybe are doing something else on the side, jogging, zone 2 stuff, their lifespan of high intensity might stay in that slow trajectory upwards.
You know what I heard in everything you just said is that everybody that works out with you should be thankful that you're not warming up for 3 hours and that it's just 30 minutes, right?
That's what you heard?
Yeah, they don't even know how good they have it. You used to warm up for 3 hours. Now it's like 30 minutes, blink of an eye.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. What about from the coaching standpoint? How do you stay enthusiastic about something that you've done day in and day out for year after year after year after year?
That's a good question.
That is a good question, dude. That's interesting, man.
I think if you go back to the reason the coach began coaching in the first place, if you have a coach that says I'm burnout, and then you say, why'd you start coaching? And they say, well, I wanted a free membership because I wanted to work out here all the time and I couldn't afford it. They're going to get burnt out because their reason for being there was selfish and not authentically a coaching spirit. So that's one reason why. Another reason could be that they really care about it and they're just, burn out. What do they call it? Burning the candle in both ends or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And in that scenario where they still love what they do, but they just can't figure out how to maintain the intensity of coaching, I think there's probably some strategies to realign their thinking or focus on what's most important. As far as that process, I think you've done this half a dozen times since I've been here where, you could explain a little bit more. Where was our first, since like 2017, we started to make bigger changes. What was your thought process behind that?
About why to make those changes?
Yeah.
I think there's a few levels of that. I think there was a part where I thought what you described it from the intensity standpoint, hey, this isn't serving people as well as it once did.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like very little control on the outcome that we were going for, which is to make people healthier, not to entertain them or like wow them. I think that was the operational side, and I don't think we could have anticipated like where that was going to go like to today. But I think personally, I wanted to create a harder problem that re-engaged me as a coach. And that's not to say that I've figured fitness out or I've figured training out. There's still parts of that perplex me and are complicated and I don't exactly understand. But I realized that for me to not get burned out, I needed to see what we were doing through a new set of eyes. And that didn't mean, and I think for some people, they think, well, we could look at this like a relationship. You said earlier that it's very common for somebody to come into a gym and be like, hey, I'll coach if you give me a membership. And let's say that the job is a person, right? Let's say being a coach is like this thing that we're doing, like it's a tangible like being that we're in a relationship with.
Okay.
That is the equivalent of saying like, hey, I really want to go to this club, so let's date. It's like, man, I don't think that's going anywhere for very long. I think you can look at the job as something that's filled with like passion, right? I mean, that's another way that people get in relationships. Like, man, I'm so attracted to you and who you are. But for anybody that's been in a relationship for more than like a few weeks, you'd be like, man, that doesn't last forever. And what I see is that people try to hang on to that initial enamor, that initial attraction. Like, man, this is so cool. Like, I love coaching. I love this thing. I'm passionate about it. But after a while, like you can't do it as an athlete, as you've described. I don't think you can get yourself really fired up to do it as a coach either. And I say that after 10 years of trying. That's not some hypothetical thing I'm talking about. It's like I was there. And so I think like a relationship, you have to – there's a guy called Edith Perel, and she has a book called Mating in Captivity. She's a relationship expert. And in the book, she says – most people in Western society will be married 2 or 3 times. And if they're lucky, it'll be to the same person. And I think you can take your job, you can take coaching, the spirit of coaching, and it can be the exact same thing.
Yeah.
If what you got into it, you're trying to preserve, it's like a relationship where as people evolve, you're like, hey, I don't want you to change. I want this to be the exact same thing. And I think, to kind of land the plane with what you asked originally, I recognized like, hey, there's no way I could keep this the same as it was when I first fell in love with it. Mm-hmm. But I remember the first time I realized that with fitness, this wasn't something that was like a short-term love affair. Mm-hmm. I remember where I was. It's Chili's.
God bless it.
Chili's on Casa Linda, not even that far from here. It's 2003, so it's 20 years ago. And I was eating with my family, and they asked me, "Hey, you're not going to eat like the
Southwestern egg rolls,
the skillet queso?" I was like, "You're not going to eat the skillet queso?" And for the first time in my life, I was like, "Nah." And that's not a big deal. Like, if my family was here, like, we didn't pressure you. We didn't make you feel like an asshole. But it was the first time that for me, I was like, I'm so into this that it's changed who I am.
Yeah.
And not even that. I realized, like, this isn't something I'm going to stop. Like, this is this pursuit of this personally, and then shortly after, like, helping other people. Like marrying Kelly, it's like, I'm committed to this. And so if you're committed to it, you have to find a way to through a new set of eyes, look at this thing that you're doing in a way that does feel fresh and new, right? So I think a lot of people, you get burnt out, which is normal, and you say, well, I'm in the wrong relationship. Mm-hmm. I need to go do this. Or you say, hey, how could I make this exciting again? How could I change the eyes that I have to see this thing that I'm doing? How could I change the language that I'm talking about this thing? And then lastly, it's like, how do I change the things that I'm doing? Mm-hmm. I think if you've been doing this for 10 plus years and you're coaching 20 hours a week, you don't even have the ability to think of anything else, right? You haven't even given yourself the opportunity to change because you're so bogged down with like the day-to-day. But I think there's a way to step back and be like, okay, how can I make this fun again? How can I make this exciting? And that's factoring in like your own personality, your own, man, the coffee's kicking in, your own interests within this big, broad place of fitness. I mean, I think that's what I did, right? I incorporated things that I was already interested in a way that I thought would help people. And now, 15 years, 20 years from Chili's, I'm so into what we're doing. It doesn't feel like I've coached 10,000 classes. It doesn't feel like I'm burned out anymore. Yet, it is a lot of the same stuff.
Now, I want to answer this question later because I think it's the harder question to answer, but how to coach people that are burnt out because of overcommitment or no free time. I want to get to that, but I want to first answer what I think is an easier question, which is how to coach someone through burnout by boredom or by lack of novelty. Because I've had waves of this before as well.
Well, you burn out because you're doing the same thing.
Burnout just because I'm on autopilot and it gets boring, or it's there's just nothing really that exciting going on, or it's just kind of like the same routine every week. I think a really simple answer for that is one, CEUs, like getting continued education, even if it's not official, but like, if you think about what you had to do to get into the door, how much studying were you doing? How much prep work were you doing? Couldn't you still do that where you're learning something new every time you coach? Like, that's an opportunity to continue increasing your game and your knowledge. Like, I remember sitting in the pool at home when I was coaching at two different gyms. I'd coach mornings at one and afternoons the other, and I'd train all day in between because I couldn't get enough information. And it was like, hey, you're about to coach this class with pull-ups or toes to bar and handstand push-ups. As a football player, it's like, I don't know what these movements are. The first time I saw someone do a handstand push-up, I was like, what is this upside-down frog thing? It completely blew my mind. And it was like a 12-year-old that I saw do it. So I thought it was like playtime. Yeah. I was like, oh, that's what they do in this sport. Yeah. But if that's the class I was coaching, I would YouTube Matt Chan videos who would explain it in detail. I would YouTube the CrossFit Infinity Wall, the points of performance. I'd write it all down. Imagine if you put not even 15 minutes, 5 minutes of research into something you don't know about the class you're coaching every time. How smart are you going to be in a year?
It's 100 hours a year.
Yeah, you're going to be
10 minutes a day is 100 hours a year.
So much smarter by the next year, and it's just going to keep compounding. Like, what if you get into a class and you're like, well, they don't need to know about the Krebs cycle, but I'll figure it out, and I can at least implant some of that somewhere or have a discussion with someone.
Krebs cycle.
Yeah, right.
Guys, sit down.
All right.
I'll talk to you about not cussing and the Krebs cycle.
Yeah. But as long as, like, if you approached it like that, instead of I'm just going to write a plan and go coach it, even if that 5 minutes of preparation you put aside for what's something I don't know that I can know in 5 minutes, or what's something I can be intentional about in this class, whether that's this class, I'm going to make sure that I absolutely say everybody's name, that I make eye contact with everybody in the class. That's a good way to get yourself out of just the autopilot monotony.
I'll say this. I think some of that, when it's fresh, is obvious. When it's new, I mean, I printed out every article of the CrossFit Journal and laminated it and put it in a notebook, you know, and I would like study that stuff.
Yeah.
But once you get really familiar, like after you know all the points performance and the details and the nuances, I think what you're describing is an intellectual humility, is to go back to something again and say, what do I not know about this? What do I think that I know that maybe isn't exactly true? And I think that's a way to stay enamored with that. Same thing with the female. It's like, man, I've been married to Kelly for 14 years, but what do I still not know about her? And to go into it maybe a different way than intellectual curiosity is just being curious, right? It's just being like a curious dude as you go forward. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, not at all. And so I think that's a good solve for boredom. Because if you are a teacher, it means that you like learning, and if you like learning, then you teach. And so it's kind of this like cycle that gives and takes and gives and takes. The next scenario of burnout might be, my mind went blank. Let me check my notes.
Well, as you're checking your notes, the teaching part is also really interesting, because I think in this industry that we're in, like if you were a factory worker, like, you know, maybe this doesn't apply, but I could make an argument that any job, the first stage is to create mastery around this skill set. The second stage is to be like, if you're really a master, you can teach somebody this. And when we had a water leak on the street, I saw this happening organically with the guys that were out there. You could tell, and it was not a uniform. There was no visual distinction. You could tell who were the masters and who were the students. They were all doing it together, but you could tell in every job, like this guy knows for sure. And I think that if you, in business, that can happen very easily because there's new employees, there's tenured employees. But for us, you're doing it right now, when you've taken something specifically and you feel really comfortable with that information, you turn around and you teach other coaches. And you're doing that with program design, right? And so I think that's also another part, is like, hey, maybe it isn't the boots on the ground, you know, training experience. Maybe it's getting so familiar with these points that you can turn around and teach somebody else. And that absolutely, as I, you know, think about my own experience, has been something that I know gets me excited. It's something that puts the pressure on me to look at those things again, because it's one thing to know it yourself, and it's another not to teach an athlete, but to teach a coach to teach an athlete. And so I think there is this long-term journey of, first learn it yourself, then teach a coach, then teach somebody that's in charge of coaches. And it's like that right there, that's 30 years in the making. It's not like a 1 year thing.
Okay, I think I got my wheels under me again. And this could begin to open the door to coaching
sport.
Football. The topic I mentioned that I'd like you to answer is how to get people out of a rut when it's like, hey, I'm completely underwater and I want to continue learning. I don't have time, or I want to hire more coaches, but I don't have time to even get them. I'll let you answer that. But I think something that helped me a lot was when I felt burnout, because I did feel like I have no time. If I have free time, it has to go to programming, or it has to go to reaching out to clients, or emails, or just something's going to keep me busy all the time. I felt underwater, but it wasn't true. And the way I found that out was there's one way to do it that I think is harder, and that's to coach yourself. Like, put yourself on the other side of the table and be like, what would I tell an athlete who told me this? It's really hard to do, and there's maybe not as much conviction there unless you're really self-motivated. What actually happened was you sat across the table from me.
It was me.
Yeah. You said. So, in other words, a coach should have a coach. And you did this out of the kindness of your heart, but you just kind of like asked me where I was stuck. And one of those places where it was just like, I don't have any time. I'm working on the weekends. I'm not enjoying time with my families. It's like I just feel completely handcuffed by this job. And you gave me 3 things to do. Simplify programming. You had me wake up a little earlier and stop eating a little earlier the night before. And that was it. And when I woke up earlier, I had all this, actually, I mean, it sounds stupid, right? It sounds stupid, but I was also tired, so I wasn't sleeping on a normal schedule, and I just found this autopilot that really worked for me. It didn't affect my performance or my job, but I just was too busy. But I had you kind of dissect the problem, find out where I was stuck, and just give me like, hey, why don't you read before you go to bed instead of watch TV? Why don't you wake up 30 minutes earlier than you normally do? And why don't you just like not try to wow everybody with these novel workouts? And let's see what happens. What happened was programming time went down. No complaints on programming. I learned more because I was reading, and I woke up. And from that point until last weekend, because I was vacationing before, I haven't worked a weekend. And that's stuff I could have said to an athlete myself. Was like, hey, why don't you try these things? But knowing that a coach that cared about me was going to ask, like, hey, were you reading before bed? Or, I mean, I'm not even sure you checked in, but I was checking in with you. But that was a difference. And so maybe when the coach is beginning to feel underwater, you could self-diagnose and coach yourself. But I'd recommend getting a Spencer Nix.
Yeah, somebody with a pulse and
yeah,
the ability to ask the question, where do you feel stuck?
Yeah.
And when I look at that, I remember that we had that conversation more than that one time.
Oh, yeah.
And we had also tried some things that didn't work. And so even though, the story you told, it sounded like I was this wizard that just, pulled out these things that worked. I mean, there were lots of iterations where we were getting closer and closer to it, but we weren't there yet. So I think for the coach that hears that, it's a long-term process, but having somebody besides yourself, just sees the things. They see the things that you think are special about you, and they realize, and you realize, okay, I'm not really that special when it comes to this.
Yeah.
And I heard something that was really good on a podcast. It said, don't make yourself special in ways that hurt you. That's good, huh? That's good. And I think that has something to do with this. When it's just us and our brains, we don't have somebody else to be like, hey, man, that's okay. And so we tell ourselves, like, man, I don't have any time. We almost like self-soothe, and we cope by reminding ourselves, like, man, everybody else has got this figured out, but for me, it's just really hard. Or, nobody's as busy as I am. We say these things to ourselves that if you're left to figure this out solo, you don't have somebody else to say like, hey man, I'm busy too.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, yeah, I'm struggling with that as well. That may be one of the best things that anybody has ever heard in their life. Like, hey, that thing you thought was like just you, it's hard for me too.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So this is just what it means to be doing what we're doing. Like,
Right.
yeah.
And it may help knowing that the person helping me with my time management who isn't single, doesn't just have a dog, and isn't a business owner, right? So when I'm looking across the table, I say, okay, this guy has a dog, has a house, has a family with 3 kids and a wife, and owns this business and has several hats on with the business. And it's like, am I really out of time? Is this stuff really taking that much time out of my life? And then to compare, and that's why I say I think it's better for you to answer that bigger question of like, what do you tell the gym owner or the business owner or the coach that's deeply involved who really feels underwater? And it's like, if I don't keep going, the business dies and the life as I know it is over.
Yeah.
How do you coach that?
Just to comment, like I was talking to Kelly's sister who has 5 kids and they're older, and I was telling her about how busy I felt, and as gently as she could, and she didn't say these words, she was like, hey, wait till your kids are actually in high school. It's like, oh man, I did it again. There we go. And man, do you remember when you were in college and you had like one class all day, and you're like, man, I'm so busy. I'm tapped out. I can't do anything else. And so I think there is this condition of being a human. It's like when you're in the thing that you're doing, it feels like a lot for you. And if we disagree that that's the case, and it's not always true, then there's a way to have some flexibility to, like you said, to look at it from somebody else's vantage point, even though it's your own life. And that's a skill, and I think it takes other people like helping us snap out of it. And then eventually I think you can look at it yourself and be like, okay, here's something I can tweak, here's something I can do. And just like you, I found that for myself, it typically doesn't take like this huge overhaul or like starting from scratch. We're like, all right, what is my life? Who am I? But it's like changing that one thing. It's like, oh man, what if I worked out at 11 instead of 12? It's like, man, what if I read here instead of here? And that one little thing, because everything works together, it's amazing how that all unfolds in what feels like a really fresh and new way of navigating life. Back to the question at hand. So say you're a coach that feels burnout. Say there aren't a lot of people around you to share the load of the job that you're required to do, which is coach. What do you do? Is that the question? I'm not going to say that it's easy. That transition is not going to like, well, all of a sudden I'll just, do these things and it'll be easy. I think what I'm about to say is going to take several months. It may even take several years. But I know it starts with this: to stop feeling sorry for yourself. And everybody that's in that position feels like a victim. And they tell themselves like, man, nobody knows how hard I am. You've got to change that shit real quick, or it'll never shift.
Do you see that as an owner? Can you identify that pretty quickly when a coach is feeling that way without them even saying anything?
I've traveled thousands of miles, and people have paid me a lot of money to overhaul their business, and we couldn't get past that. I got all the systems and frameworks and SOPs in the world, but it didn't matter because that person felt like they didn't deserve to not be in that position. That's the honest truth.
How much responsibility of that feeling is lack of checking in from the business owner versus the coach just feeling that way? Because like it can get mundane where you're like, I just feel like I'm teaching classes and that's it. I don't have any purpose. And so they build up these silos. Sure, like it's your job to be like, hey man, I feel this way. I feel like I'm underwater. So how much responsibility lies on the person who feels that way versus the person who's leading and steering the ship?
Yeah. Now in this scenario, I'm actually talking about the business owner. So I think in CrossFit, if we're just, calling a spade, the owner is the operator. The owner is the number one employee of the business. And so in that scenario, the owner has told themselves, I don't deserve to do things differently than what I inherited from this affiliation program. I need to charge $150. My members are going to leave if I raise the rates by $5. And so I've got to keep everything exactly the same. And so just like the system of scheduling, there's a lot that goes into this. If you're not making any money, and now we've, shifted into like a different category, but if you're not making any money, you can't hire anybody else. And so you either can hire somebody for free or you can change the structure of your business. Changing the structure of your business does give you a little bit more margin. And so if you're the owner-operator that's doing all the coaching, you need to sit back with all the experience that you've had coaching and say, what makes more sense to me? How do I want to care for these people differently than I have in the past? You need to create a structure, and you need to believe with conviction, like you're on a holy crusade, that that's what needs to happen. And then you change it. And you know that people are going to leave. But you've already made it okay with yourself because your intentions are pure about why you would do that. From there, you find a few other people that can support what you're doing. And the first thing that you do is you train them to do the thing that you're the best at. You train them to do the thing that you know that you can teach them the best to do, which we think is probably coaching. Now, some people will tell you, well, just offload all the shit that you don't want to do. But first, pour into somebody in a way that you feel like they can start to do the thing that you know how to do very well. Because then when they don't do it perfectly, which will happen, you can coach them. If they're doing something that you hate and you're not very good at and they don't do it well, it's not going to go very well. And so, man, long story short, I think first you have to change your own psychology. You have to come up with a plan, and you have to execute that knowing that it's not going to go very well in a way that you can bring other people in. Business is not supposed to be this one person just slugging it out. It's supposed to be this ragtag group of renegades that come together for a great cause, and they're on this journey, they're on this crusade to make a huge difference. And when you hire your first person, they will not be as good at you at the thing that you're doing. But after you've done that 7 or 8 times, the collective brain of what those guys can do is 100 times better than what you can do. And it's the reason that for this business, I don't promote myself, because all of you guys together are way better than me by myself. Do I know how to coach? Well, yeah, but who cares? Because putting all the different Zords together to make the Mighty Morphin, Power Ranger thing, that's way better. That's way better than one guy doing karate, on the side. Now back to what you asked, Caleb. If you're the boss and there's somebody that you see is reaching burnout, you need to have a plan for them to continue to evolve. And that's the thing that even as I say this, I feel like I'm always trying to work on. I don't want Chad to get burnout. I don't want Marty to get burnout. And so I'm constantly looking for ways. It's like, okay, what is it that they need? Is it more money? Is it more responsibility? Is it something like we talked about that they're really interested in? And like, how can I support that? And so, yeah, there's one part of this where it's like, man, you just got to do the job. It's like, hey, you're coaching the squad again. All right, see it through a new set of eyes. You've coached it 1,000 times, but that person that's doing the squat hasn't done it 1,000 times. So, realize it's not about you and it's about them. But there is some type of nice juggling act between like, hey, do the job, do it well. But then how can we, just like I said for myself, how can we continue to explore these things that you find interesting in? How can I cultivate that? How can I be a few steps ahead of you because I've been doing this longer than you, to say like, hey, this is a great way that you could do it. And then just also say it's okay to be burnt out. It's okay to be burnt out. I felt burnout this week. I felt burnout 2 days ago. I just had to sit and stare at the wall for a little bit and remind myself all the stuff that we talked about.
Yeah.
And remind myself that this isn't some short-term fling.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm in a long-term committed relationship with fitness.
Mm-hmm.
She's my girl. And I just got to find a way to see her through new eyes and love her again and strip it down to just the bare essentials. And, you know, yeah.
No one's going to laugh at that one. It's good, Spence.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, not what we were talking about. And thanks for letting me just, riff there for a sec.
Hey, for old time's sake.
For old time's sake.
Well, there's some other causes of burnout. Some that came to mind, especially in our current time, especially if you're an owner. I'm not sure. Most gyms probably don't have the model we have, where we have coaches that have assigned members.
Mm-hmm. They should.
Yeah, they're at like, we've got, most of our coaches are 40 to 80 members that their contact point is their coach.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of that burnout can be that your phone's going off all the time, because if they have questions about the workout or they're going out of town, this and that, it's all stuff that we say we offer. And so when that message comes in at a time that's inconvenient to you, that's not because they were like, oh, let me bug my coach real quick.
Mm-hmm.
It's just when they thought of it and you told them that you're available for them. And so here comes the message at any time of the day. So I say that because I think when a message comes at a time that's not a work hour, sometimes we'll be like, what are they messaging us right now for? But that's your perspective on it, where it's like, you need to have the boundary of, if I didn't communicate work hours to them, then I'm open for business all the time.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, you don't have to communicate that, and you can respond when it's convenient for you and you know it's not going to be late for the client, right? And so setting boundaries with your client is really important as far as communication and their expectations. If that's not said at the beginning, there can be some headbutting.
Yeah. What are some ways that you found that to be effective? You said do it at the beginning, right? You get out in front of it.
Yeah.
Are there ways that you can think back or like, man, this landed really well? Like, here's a great example of how it was clear how we were going to navigate back and forth.
Yeah. Well, I think at the beginning, as a contrast, I wanted to sell it. Be like, hey, look, this is what we're offering now. You can message me anytime you want. And then I would get that message and be like 11:30 at night, like, well, I'm up and I don't want this notification on my phone tomorrow morning, so I'm going to respond. And so I'm not actually mad at them. I'm mad at my own management of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the intro, the assessment, and communicating that, like, hey, look, if you message me a day before about adjusting a workout or you traveling or something coming up, I can most likely get to it. Or you could be like, hey, I'm on my True Coach from 3 to 4 p.m. every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Uh-huh.
Message me at that time and I'll get back to you. Or it could just be like, hey, let's be reasonable. I'm a full-time coach. I can be responsive from 9 to 5.
Yeah.
Any day of the week. And it was Mar that helped me with that, because I felt this conviction to respond when someone asked for help, just like it's a text message from family. But putting up that barrier, she was just like, hey, your weekends are yours. You don't have to respond to your clients.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, 3 to 4 messages come in Friday at 5 p.m. And I'm just like, I'm not gonna respond. Monday morning, I respond, and all the responses were like, hey, thanks.
Yeah.
Oh, so I didn't ruin your life by not responding on the weekend.
Yeah.
Oh, what a relief. So I think that's one area where we can see burnout, and that can be helpful. Another one,
Yeah, that's good.
If you're programming, that can take a lot of time. For the creatives that do that, it's one of those assignments that has no time cap, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so one option could be putting a time cap on it. You know, there's a lot of distractions. So if you're programming and you're just be like, hey, I have 60 minutes to get this job done.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the program will suffer that much if you like try to get it done within that time, because you're going to eliminate distractions. This is my time to program.
Mm-hmm.
That's one way to get around it. Or just don't write workouts that take an hour to explain.
That's a great point. It's a great point also to have systems, to have boundaries even with how you program. And I think that's one of the things that with, constant varied functional movements at high intensity, it can get overwhelming because the possibilities are almost infinite.
Mm-hmm.
But when you create a 8 to 12 week mesocycle with specific benchmarks,
Mm-hmm.
hey, that puts boundaries on what you can do.
Mm-hmm.
And when we say like, hey, this is going to be the weekly microcycle, and yeah, it's not going to be as entertaining as the unknown and unknowable, but it's going to allow me to plug and play in a way that I know will be progressive. And those things have been really helpful as I watch you develop as an artist. Yeah. And you are.
Thank you. What's another one? I think that covers most of
I think that's great.
the reasons for
I
burnout.
think that's great. Yeah. So
Possible causes.
if you're a coach and you're listening to this and you feel some of that, first thing, just like I tell my kids, hey, it's okay to feel that. It's okay to feel that way. That's normal.
Yeah.
Even in any great relationship, you're gonna be like, man, I feel like I need a little recharge, need a little perspective shift. And the last thing we'll say, and then we can move on, or we can just high five and be done. A lot of people get into this because they say they're passionate about it.
Mm.
And when they say the word passion, they mean enthusiasm. And that enthusiasm comes from an interest and a curiosity, which is all good. But you and I both know that that's not really what passion means.
Mm-hmm.
When Mel Gibson titled his movie Passion of the Christ, he was not thinking of like Jesus opening a gym and just working out all day and like having some fun, right? Just being a silly goose with this thing he had as a hobby.
Yeah.
Passion means, well, the root word is pati, P-A-T-I.
Mm-hmm.
It's Latin, and that means, do I know? It means suffering. Passion means suffering for the thing you've identified as the cause that your life has. So some of this is just redefining what you're okay suffering for.
So if you say you're passionate about something, and essentially what you're saying, whether you know it or not, is this is something that I love so much I'm willing to suffer for.
Oh, yeah. Which is the opposite of doing something because it makes you happy.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, if you choose something that you really feel like is a part of your purpose here on earth, you are saying that you're willing to be unhappy for it.
Mm-hmm.
That's heavy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, it doesn't mean that it's not satisfying. It doesn't mean you don't find joy. You don't find great peace in doing what you think is your, to quote The Alchemist, like your personal legend.
Mm-hmm.
But it also is okay to arrive at points of burnout or frustration or times where it's like, man, this is really hard. And that doesn't mean you're in the wrong industry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hope that helps.
Well, if you have any questions, you can email me or Spencer at any time of the day, any week, and we'll respond to you immediately.
Send me a text message at midnight telling me it's an emergency.
That was a joke. But no, you can email us if you have it. Anyway, anything else?
Well, when I was a kid, there was a weather number. This is obviously before iPhones. You know, did y'all have that?
A weather number?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
like-
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 972-563-5673.
Nice.
And it would say Terrell area weather.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of times I gave that number out. And it's like, yeah, you just give me a call. And they would call and be like, Terrell area weather.
You dog.
Yeah, man. That was bad as I wanted to be, dude. So that just made me think like, yeah, just give us a call at 972-563-5733. Be quick to respond.
Yeah. You can email me at name@email.com.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Are we live? Okay. Yeah, I'm getting a question here.
What's the question?
This is Todd from
Todd.
Cedar Rapids.
Cedar Rapids.
Yeah.
Todd.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's this question?
Todd's wondering if all of this can be applied to dog training.
Mm.
You know, there was a time when I was new here and you guys it wasn't a podcast, but you did these videos and you let me sit down on it. And I made a case that learning to train dogs is why I was good at training people.
Huh. Do you still feel that way?
I do. I mean, fundamentally,
Uh-huh.
obviously you don't want to anthropomorphize animals.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's right. But fundamentally, the main concept was this, is that when you train a dog, you never put that dog in a position to fail.
Mm.
Meaning you meet the dog where it's at. Because if you tell a dog to sit that doesn't know what sit means and then you punish it, I mean, you can imagine how that turns out. But if you tell a dog to sit and you're able to push the butt down to the ground and lift the chin up so that it follows, and then you that's not a position to fail until you know, okay, now I'm not going to touch the butt. I'm just going to pull up on the collar, sit. And now it's like I'm present close enough to where I can say sit without hands. And if it doesn't happen, I'm close enough to do it. And then the dog is progressed to where you can be across the room and say sit, and you know the dog knows exactly what you're talking about.
Mm.
So doing that with an athlete's kind of the same way.
Yeah.
Where it's like, are you going to
Sit.
tell an athlete to do something and expect them to do it because you know they can or think they should?
Mm.
And then are you going to punish the athlete or get upset with the athlete because you didn't progress them well? Is essentially what happens in that scenario.
Wow. That's really good. It's a great analogy. Now, Trek is your best friend.
Yeah.
My dog, I would say he's like my 10th best friend.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like him. I'm happy he's around, but I'm not always as accommodating
Yeah.
as I should be.
Yeah.
But I found that what you said is true.
Mm-hmm.
There's only been a couple times that he's like flipped out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because I jumped from one command to the next, and I put him in a situation
Mm-hmm.
where I realized he didn't feel, this is going to sound weird, but he didn't feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
And I called the trainer, the guy that trained Bodie. I was like, hey, what's the deal here? And he's like, well, walk me through what you did. I was like, well, he had a kennel outside. I threw him in here and just left. He's like, well, you have to still take him through the commands
Mm-hmm.
of sit, place, and before you close the door, you got to make him feel like it's okay for him to be in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought there was a lot of good symbolism with that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I'm 1/10 the coach.
The dog coach?
Yeah,
I don't
that
know.
you are. Actually,
there's-
I'm not a dog coach at all. I just have a dog.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to tell a story now. Now I have a story.
All right, good. This will be what we finish with.
Yeah, we'll
Okay, yeah.
go backwards.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll go backwards.
It's good to finish with a story.
It was the 4th of July.
Yes.
At Lake Kiowa, 2019.
Oh yeah.
I
Gainesville, Texas.
Gainesville, Texas. Now, Trek is my dog. He is a trained gun dog, water dog. He can swim underwater. He can chase cars somewhat safely. He can do all kinds of things. He knows all the hunting tricks, you know, where you can tell him back. He'll whistle, stop, blow the whistle. He'll stop and look at you. You can point which direction. I mean, he does all this at what I would say is at entry level handling,
He's very impressive.
but he's a family dog first, so it's just cool that he has these tricks that he learned when he was 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
So he understands like how to work with a coach, essentially.
He's coachable.
Now here's the problem: we wanted him to catch a frisbee on the run, like a receiver running a route. The problem is no one ever taught me how to throw a frisbee, so I couldn't do that part. You can throw a frisbee, so you could do that part. But also, Trek has never caught something on the fly, except for like, hey, sit, here's a ball, catch it in the air, that kind of stuff. I watched Spencer take my dog, who's never really seen a frisbee, go from not just catching it on the fly, but then catching it on the run within 15 minutes. And at that point, we'd known each other a couple years. It was like, that's an elite coach. He just taught a different species how to do something using progressions.
Progressions, man.
And it went from sit in front of me, here, catch it, okay, here, catch it, bring it back, here, catch it, get a little further. And then it was like, hey, you sit there, and then I think you threw it to the side. So he had to start to run to get it. So you let him a little bit until it got to sit by me. I gave him the back command, sprint, and then you threw up a nice pass, and he caught it on the fly.
Does he still do that?
I don't think he's done it since. Maybe I had him do it once
we gotta
since,
fix
but
that.
we got to check it out. I just thought that was incredible.
We really lucked out.
But
all the credit to Trek.
There's
Really.
all the credit to Trek, yeah, of course, and that's what the good coach should say. But the lesson there is, I mean, as a coach, this doesn't have anything to do with burnout really, but maybe this lesson can help you get out of burnout by using it, is to make sure you're meeting your athletes where they're at, not expecting too much from them, and certainly not punishing them for not meeting your expectations.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then just adding that one little bit. And really what that means, knowing how to progress something means knowing how to deconstruct something entirely. So how can you take it from this most simple form and then add steps? And honestly, doing that, I mean, what are we supposed to do in anything we want to be good at? Always go back to the fundamentals.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're going to slow anyone down doing that.
Yeah. You know what I whispered in Trek's ear when I taught him how to throw the frisbee? I said, hey, dude, I don't know where we're going, but I know exactly how to get there.
Yes.